Hello everyone and welcome to another Twinmotion video. Today I'm going to be covering an introduction to the HDRI environment inside of Twinmotion. So let's get started. To access the HDRI environment, select on the Ambience panel, make sure that you have the environment panel selected, scroll down close to the bottom and you will find an HDRI environment section. Expand it if it's not already expanded, and here are the available settings. In this video, I am only going to go over the Skydome option. I will be using the backdrop HDRI to use as an example for something, but I won't be going into the settings of that. I'm going to go ahead and enable my HDRI environment, and you'll see that the default option is Skydome. A skydome is a sphere or a dome above the scene that simulates the lighting. Now this skydome can be used in conjunction with an HDRI, which is what we have here. HDRI is a high dynamic range image, and this is used to perform image-based environment lighting. When an HDRI environment is used, lighting and reflections are based on the information contained in the HDRI. Skydomes can be rotated, but they cannot be moved or scaled. To get a better understanding of this, I'll switch to backdrop HDRI. And I'm also going to load in the same Noon Clear 01. A backdrop HDRI is very similar to a skydome. It's pretty much the same thing, except it's much smaller. It is movable and it can also be scaled as well. So I'm using this just to illustrate what is happening when you have the skydome selected. It's just a much bigger version of what you see here in the backdrop HDRI. You'll notice that as I'm rotating the HDRI, the projection of the image is rotating around the dome. This is exactly what is happening with the skydome. So as I perform a rotation, the texture is essentially sliding along the skydome. For the rest of this example, I will be using the Lumen Global Illumination system. So let's take a look at some of the settings. The first setting that we have available to us is the intensity. The intensity controls the intensity of light emitted from the skydome. So you'll notice that as I raise the intensity, things get brighter. As I decrease the intensity, things get darker. The next setting we have that was shown earlier is the rotation of the skydome itself, or of the HDR. So I can rotate this anywhere from 0 to 360 degrees. And you'll notice that in this case, the lighting of my model is affected by this as well. The HDRI preview shows a preview image of the skydome. To open a menu where you can manage skydomes, you can click on the ellipse and you could go to the open option, which will open up Windows Explorer and allow you to load in your own custom HDRIs. Underneath the HDRI preview, we have a details panel which can be expanded. In the details panel, we have three options available to us: HDRI effects lighting, lock sun to HDRI, and height fog effects. So we'll go through each of these one at a time. To better illustrate this, I'm also going to load in a different HDRI environment, which you can find from your Twinmotion standard library. I'm going to go and load in an outdoor scene called Approaching Storm. To load in, I can just drag and drop from the library into the HDRI preview. To get further clarity, I will also go and switch off my starting landscape so that I can see more information. I'm going to place down a primitive and scale it up slightly to demonstrate the first setting we have here, which is HDRI effects lighting. When this setting is enabled, the skydome affects the lighting in the scene. By default, this setting is enabled. When it is disabled, lighting is provided by the dynamic sky in Twinmotion. Regardless of what this setting is set to, whether it is on or off, if you use the path tracer, it will always render as though it is on. If I get a bit closer to my primitive here, and I go and make the material slightly more reflective so that I can see the HDRI in the background. This is one of the easiest ways to illustrate what the first function of the details panel does, which is HDRI effects lighting. With it switched on, you can see that I can see the reflection of the HDRI itself. As I perform rotations, I can see that information adjusting inside of my reflection. So the reflections are coming from the HDRI. If I switch the HDRI effects lighting off, you will notice that I no longer see the HDRI in my reflection. I will only see the dynamic sky system from Twinmotion. If I zoom out a little bit and just take a look at the landscape, if I have HDRI effects lighting switched on, I can see that the color of the Skydome or of the HDRI has an effect on the landscape. Whereas if I switch it off, again, I'm just using the normal dynamic sky in this case. Switching this setting on or off is purely dependent on what style you are going for, and as mentioned, even if this is switched off, if I activate the path tracer, it will render as though it is switched on. The reflections will always come from the HDRI environment if an HDRI is enabled. The next option that we have is lock sun to HDRI. To better explain this, I'm going to switch from a Skydome back to a backdrop again. So I'll switch to the backdrop and I'm going to zoom out a little bit to the outside. And I'm also going to switch the HDRI to the outdoor scene for the backdrop HDR. Now, when lock sun to HDRI is selected, basically what it does is it syncs up the dynamic sun in Twinmotion with the sun source from the HDRI. So you'll notice as I'm rotating, the dynamic sky is adjusting as well as the rotation of the HDRI. If I switch off lock sun to HDRI, what Twinmotion will then do is it will use the normal dynamic sky that we have and allow us to make very custom adjustments to this. So I would be able to adjust the time of day, and I would also be able to update my north offset as well to get the sun to where I want it to shine. Switching back to my Skydome, if lock sun to HDRI is ticked, the shadows are going to fall in the correct direction. I can see that my sun is in that location in the HDRI, and I can see that the shadows are falling correctly because lock sun to HDRI is selected. So as I rotate this, the sun source is rotating as well as the dynamic sun in Twinmotion, causing the shadows to always update accurately. I need to be careful about disabling this because if I disable this and I can clearly see the sun in my image, I can see that there is a very obvious disconnect here between where the sun source is coming from and the direction that the shadows are falling in. If I cannot see the sun in my HDRI image, then I have a bit more freedom to set the shadows and the time of day as I would like because the location of the sun source is unknown. The final option that we have is height fog effects. When selected, height fog settings affect the Skydome as well as the scene. This setting can be enabled or disabled in real-time rendering, but cannot be disabled in the path tracer, very similar to the HDRI effects lighting function. So if I leave height fog effects on and I go and hide my starting ground, I'll see that I cannot see the HDRI underneath this point. But if I switch off my height fog effects, I will see that I actually have more information that I can start to gain access to visually. If I scroll up and I adjust my height fog to around 60%, and I scroll down and I select height fog effects for the HDRI, I can see that the height fog effects start to get applied to the HDRI image as well. As mentioned previously, swapping out HDRIs is quite a simple process. Just head to the HDRI environment section in the library, select any of the options available, and most of them will need to be downloaded. So you will always have a little download button over there. If the download button is not lit up, that is because you are currently not signed in to your Epic Games account. Download the required HDRI and then simply drag and drop into the HDRI preview. Like most assets, there are websites that provide free HDRIs, and there are also HDRIs that are paid for and much higher quality. That is everything that I wanted to quickly run through with regards to HDRI environments. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks very much for watching, and see you in the next video.